Rob here from the Wizard of Light. I'm going to talk about my camera system. I am shooting with the Sony series cameras. My main camera is the A7R, 42 megapixel. I have a backup camera, it's the A7s. I never go to a shoot without a backup camera. I used to have my Nikon as my backup, which I never needed because the Sony always worked. If you don't have a backup, it'll be the one time, if you go without one, something's going to happen. So I always make sure I have enough batteries, enough cards, enough everything in a backup camera. So as soon as I got the A7S, I immediately got rid of the Nikon. So I'm 100% Sony. The A7S, as you know, is a 12 megapixel camera, which means a smaller file size. I don't really care about file size, never been an issue. 42 is actually more than what I need, but I'll take it if it's there. So the A7S is really good in low light. I use it, say for example, when I'm at a wedding at the reception hall and it's kind of low light, you know, they got all these lights going on and it's not terribly bright. Well, I'll put the 85 1.8 Zeiss Batis lens, this lens here. I'll throw it on this camera here and I'll shoot candids 100% ambient light. So I'll go to 20,000 ISO. This is with the A7S. 20,000 ISO, and I'll shoot candids with the light that's occurring during the reception hall. And I'll adjust the Kelvin on the white balance so that it's equivalent to tungsten, because that's predominantly what the light is. Or I'll shoot on automatic white, and it's pretty good. I mean, it does an amazing job. So the A7S works in that capacity. It also works not only as my backup, but if I'm on a wedding, I have a double strap. I think this is a Black Rapid. So I have one of these on one side, and I also have another Black Rapid on this side. So I'm packing two. And this is my entire system. So I've got spare batteries, always bring spare batteries in my pocket. One of the main complaints about the Sony system was the batteries. If you look at the reviews online, and I've checked them all out pretty much, because when I really considered this system, it was hard for me to leave Nikon. I had all the glass, I had all the bodies, and to switch to Sony was not an easy decision. So I did a lot of research, and the A7R came in last year, and when the guy at this camera store called, his name was Adam. You know Adam, everybody knows Adam. He says, your camera's in. Actually, he didn't say that. He gave me a code. I said, don't tell my wife. So he spoke in mystery code. He said, the eagle has landed. I knew what he was talking about. So I ran to the camera store. I said, do you have a lens? Because I ordered the 85 1.5 lens, but it was not in yet. So he said, well, we got the 16 to 35, which is this lens here. I said, great, let me try it. I brought my Nikon, I brought my 24 to 70, and I did pictures of him by the windows. And I compared the files. I ran back to the studio. I compared the files from the Nikon. I compared the files from the A7R on the 16 to 35, this lens here. And it was clear to me that the Sony was infinitely better. Okay, you may argue with me on that point, and that's okay. For me, they were better. They weren't a little bit better, they were way better. So I called them up, I said, sold, I'm coming over to give you my credit card, and I'm gonna buy that lens too, because I really like this lens. So this is the 16 to 35, which I use for candids whenever I need anything wide, commercial, architecture. It's an absolutely amazing, beautiful lens. Very, very sharp. A little bit slower because it's an f4, but doesn't matter. Especially with it being a wide-angle lens, I can crank the ISO up even on the A7R. The A7R, I would gladly shoot up at 12,000. What is it, 12,800? Is that it? Yeah, that's it, right? 12,800 ISO. For candids, easy. And I've created many, many images. You can barely see any noise or grain. So that's how I acquired my Sony with the A7R with the 16 to 35. About a month and a half later, the 85 came in, which has become my de facto portrait lens. So I put a lot of mileage on it. My wife was commenting the other day, she said, look at the wear. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? See the wear on that camera already. Okay. Now I shoot weddings, families, babies, commercial, executive shots, grad shots, proms, that sort of stuff. I do a lot of theater work as well, and the camera's getting a lot of use. So I've had a lot of images go through that have workflowed on the computer, and I gotta say I'm really, really, really happy. I'm selling lots of canvases and selling a lot of images for a lot of different purposes, and I'm really, really happy. I'm really happy with the sharpness of this lens, the 85 1.8 Zeiss Batis. It's the Batis line. I think there's one line higher, is there not? Was it called the Otis or something like that? But it's manual focus, and it's like 5 times more expensive. And then there's I think there's a Sony line, I'm not sure. But I really wanted the Zeiss lenses, and it's an amazingly sharp lens. So that's the system I'm using too. Now, I need an in-between lens because the 85, and then we got the 16 to 35. So I ordered let me check it out. I cannot remember if it's a 55 1.8 Zeiss lens for the Sony. And there it is, small. These lenses aren't cheap, by the way. I mean, this one was 1,200 Canadian dollars, which is probably $9.99 US. Fair investment for a manual, not a manual, but a standard lens. This is a standard lens. It's the 55. Beautiful, beautiful sharpness, beautiful images. I use it if I have a large family and the 85 is too long. I'll fire up with this thing here for large families. So, you know, it's not a lot. It's not often I use large families where I need to get the 55 fired up, because a lot of times the 85 will work if it's outdoors especially. I got a lot of room. So it doesn't get a lot of usage, but it's very important that I have it. So that's my camera system, and I shoot 100% JPEG. I do a custom white balance in the studio. One of the things that drives me nuts about the Sony is you cannot you do a custom white balance with a flash. You can only do a custom white balance with ambient light. So it won't pick up the flash off the grade card, which kind of like was like, all right, whatever. Problem solved. I went in and shot a grade card. I guesstimated using the Kelvin scale, brought it into Photoshop, adjusted, reshot, adjusted the Kelvin scale. So I've tweaked my settings for my studio using the Kelvin scale on this Sony, so I get very, very accurate custom white balance of sorts, custom white balance that I've created that way. I mean, it's a workaround and it works for me. All my studio stuff looks really, really good. So it's nice to have a custom white balance, especially in the studio. When I'm shooting on location, candid and what have you, I often shoot on automatic, or I'll use one of the factory default settings. 100% JPEG, no, what's really cool too, I know a lot of people don't like shooting JPEG. They don't understand it, but I'm telling you it works, and I know a lot of photographers that work it. But I often will work the JPEG images into Camera Raw, the editor program that came in Photoshop, and it still gives me almost the same leeway and flexibility and tools that I can use on a RAW file. So if I ever need it, there it is. So I think I covered just about everything. That's my system predominantly, and it's also small, light, lean, and mean. And it all fits in one bag with my camera, my nits and flashes, spare batteries, spare cards, light meter, and it's a small little backpack that goes on my back. It's absolutely amazing. I love the size of these cameras. That's one of the reasons I was attracted to them. I should have mentioned too, and I'll mention it now, the batteries don't last, and that's why I have 9 or 10 batteries. I go out with a lot of batteries. I don't care that they don't last because this is 100% electronic. There's absolutely no prisms or ground glass or anything of that nature. It's 100% electronic. I really like the electronic aspect to it. So when I take a picture and I'm looking through my screen, the preview is like looking at an IMAX screen. Then I've assigned buttons. I can zoom in right away and verify focus, verify exposure instantly. And it's also really cool that you got that little swivel screen in the back. Bing, I can bring it up high and I can shoot down on crowds, bridal parties and what have you, or I can shoot down low, get down to babies or pets, dogs, you know, like this here, looking down at your screen. It's kind of neat. I love that, man. Absolutely love that. So what else? Am I missing anything, Jackson? Action Jackson. What does he hate about the system? There's not a lot. I mean, I read the reviews And people talk about the fact that the batteries don't last like it's a really bad thing. It's like, whatever, I'm okay with that. There's not a lot I hate about it. I love the size and the quality of the images, and I think that that's the big one for me. The big one that really drove me nuts. This is like, when you're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, this is ugly. And Jackson just reminded me. The sensors are exposed. When you take the lens off, the sensor's right there. There's no screen in front of it, so it tends to get dirty. So I tend not to change lenses unless I absolutely have to. And I've got some really high quality sensor swabs, so when I have to clean it, it's a little more maintenance than my Nikon system. Okay, it kind of threw me off guard at first. I'm over it now. It's working out really, really well, but that's just one of those little things that sort of caught me off guard, was the fact that the sensors will get dirty if you're not careful. I contacted Sony about it, and the guy was like, I told him, I said, why don't you have a screen? Like, there is a screen that goes over at least giving you the option that the screen will block the sensor when you take the lens off. And he's like, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll mention it to the team. Whether or not he will, I don't know. If it's a corporate blah, 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 blah. But that's it. So that's my system, man, and that's the way. I'm a Sony guy. Welcome to the family. Yeah.